Welcome to Awaken Daily Life. If you really look at how most of us live our lives today, practically everything we do is about building a buffer against discomfort.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, comfort is basically the default setting of modern life.
Right. Think about it. You want the climate control in your car to be exactly 70 degrees. You want your food delivered right to your door so you don't even have to walk out in the rain.
Yeah, and you probably spend a massive portion of your waking life just, trying to build up a financial safety net.
Yeah, exactly.
We treat hardship or physical discomfort as a failure of planning. Like, if you're cold or hungry or exhausted, it means something has gone wrong and you need to fix it immediately. It's just human nature to avoid suffering.
It is. So in a world where you and I are constantly chasing that comfort, what actually drives a person to wake up one day and intentionally choose a path of extreme, unrelenting hardship?
Yeah, that is the big question.
That is exactly the story we are stepping into today.
Yeah.
We are looking at the life of Master Dianwu. This is a man who walked away from an incredibly promising, comfortable worldly life when he was just 11 years old.
11.
Yes, entirely by his own choice to seek the authentic teachings of the Buddha.
And right out of the gate, I think it's important we set a very specific tone here because, when you hear Master or Buddha, it's really easy to start imagining some mythical figure from ancient folklore floating on a cloud.
Right.
But we are talking about a real flesh and blood human being who lived in our modern era.
We're just going to look at the concrete facts of what he actually did, the physical reality of what he endured, and the specific choices he made.
Yeah, there's no need to over-romanticize his life because the sheer reality of his path is staggering enough on its own.
Completely.
So, where does a story like this actually begin? Because I have to assume you don't just wake up as a kid and decide to walk out into the wilderness. Was he running away from a bad situation? Like, was he in poverty?
Not at all. And that is what makes his starting point so fascinating. He was born in 1971 in Dali, which is a historic city in Yunnan province in southwestern China.
Okay.
He wasn't running away from a broken home or a lack of options. In fact, he was born into an environment of extremely high expectations.
What kind of environment are we talking about?
Well, his father was a military officer, which naturally brought a very strict, structured discipline to the household.
Right, I can imagine.
But equally significant was his mother. She was highly educated. She actually attended the prestigious Peking University. And she took it upon herself to personally educate him from a very young age.
So she's tutoring him before he even gets to regular schooling.
Exactly. But she wasn't just teaching him basic reading and writing. She had him reading, studying, and actively memorizing classical Chinese works.
Like what?
Well, as a little boy, he was memorizing the Analects, which is a Confucian classic. At the same time, he was learning the Tao Te Ching, a Taoist classic on simplicity.
Oh, wow.
And the Zhuangzi, which is another major Taoist philosophical work.
Wait, hold on. I need to pause you right there. You're talking about an elementary school-aged kid memorizing the Zhuangzi.
Yes.
Most kids at that age are just, I don't know, trying to figure out how to ride a bike or watching cartoons. How does a child's brain even process complex Taoist philosophy?
That's a great question. But whether he understood all the nuances at age 7 or 8 isn't really the point.
Yeah.
The point is the architecture it was building in his mind. When you are hardwiring a child's brain with texts that constantly ask big questions about morality and the meaning of a good life, you are giving them a profoundly developed moral imagination.
That makes a lot of sense.
He didn't grow up in a superficial environment. His mind was primed to grapple with enduring ideals.
It's like his baseline for what mattered in life was calibrated entirely differently than a normal kid's.
Yes.
And if you're listening to this, you have to realize he was basically being groomed for serious worldly success. If you have a military father and a Peking University mother, the expectation is that you study hard and lock down a very prestigious, comfortable career.
Precisely. His family expected him to follow a highly successful worldly path. He had every worldly advantage. But because his mind was primed by those classical texts, he was uniquely receptive when the real catalyst arrived.
Which was what?
As a child, he came across a book. It was a biography of Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical founder of Buddhism. And reading that book completely captivated him.
Just a biography?
Just a biography. But he didn't read it and think, oh, what an inspiring historical figure. He read it and decided, quite literally, that he wanted to become someone exactly like the Buddha.
Wow.
He didn't wait around to grow up first. By the time he was 11 years old, he already decided to become a monk.
11 years old. I mean, I try to put myself in those shoes. When I was 11, my biggest commitment was trying to beat a video game.
Right.
How do we know this wasn't just a childhood phase? Kids get obsessed with things all the time and drop them a week later.
You know, it wasn't a phase because of the sheer permanence of his resolve. She later said something striking. He said he decided at 11, and he did not want to wait even one day.
Man, that is intense.
He was entirely sincere. He even admitted that if his parents hadn't eventually given him permission to leave home, he would have just left secretly anyway.
So it takes that initial childhood spark, but it gives it the weight of a total uncompromising commitment.
Exactly. Which brings us to the moment right after his ordination, which is the formal act of becoming a monk.
Okay.
He is stepping into this entirely new reality, and he sits down with his new teacher. And this teacher happens to be a man over 100 years old.
Wow, over a century old. That alone carries so much weight.
Right. So imagine you are this young, determined kid, and you're sitting across from a man who has lived over 100 years. The teacher looks at him and essentially lays out an ultimatum about his life's direction.
What did he say?
He tells Dianwu that there are two distinct paths he can take. The first path was to become a Dharma teacher.
Okay, so someone who teaches the texts.
Yes, but the teacher made it very clear that you cannot do this just by reading books in a comfortable library. To be a true Dharma teacher, you have to rely on direct experience gained through physical hardship.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning he would have to walk the 4 sacred mountains, which are major Buddhist pilgrimage sites in China, and he would have to do it entirely on foot without carrying a single cent of money.
Wait, no money at all?
None, and without allowing himself to stay in comfortable temples along the way.
That is just grueling physical endurance. No money, no safety net. What was the second option?
The second path was to become a meditation master. And the training for this was just as punishing, but in a different way. He would have to deeply master sitting meditation and learn to enter samadhi.
Samadhi.
Yes, which is a state of deep concentration. He would need to live in large, strict monastic communities for years, specifically to grind down his personal habits and his ego.
Basically putting himself in a human pressure cooker.
Exactly. And the final requirement of the second path was true remote mountain seclusion.
And how remote are we talking?
Absolute seclusion. Going so deep into the wild mountains that no one knew where you were and no one took responsibility for whether you lived or died.
Jesus.
The core philosophy this 100-year-old teacher was imparting was that cultivation begins in adversity. If you fear suffering, or if you refuse it, you simply cannot walk this path.
So the teacher puts these two incredibly difficult, life-altering blueprints on the table and says, pick one.
Yes. And Master Dianwu's response is what defines the rest of his life. He doesn't pick one.
What did he do?
He looks at this impossibly hard road, looks at the teacher and says, I want both.
You have got to be kidding me.
He wanted to fulfill both paths.
Why on earth would anyone voluntarily choose double the suffering? He is essentially signing up for years of starving on the road, followed by a very real chance of dying alone in a cave.
Because for him, it wasn't about finding the most efficient way to get a title. This is the moment where that pure inspiration he had as an 11-year-old was forged into an exacting, lifelong blueprint.
And the craziest part is, he didn't just say he wanted both to impress the teacher. He actually walked out the door and did them.
He really did. Starting at age 18, he undertook years of walking pilgrimages and severe hardship. 6 consecutive years of walking.
And remember the rule the teacher gave him? No money.
No money. He walked to Mount Imai, Mount Wutai, Mount Jua, and Mount Putuo. And later he walked the punishing Sichuan Tibet, Qinghai Tibet, and Xinjiang Tibet routes.
I think it's important for you listening to really visualize this. This isn't modern backpacking.
No, not at all.
He doesn't have a GPS, he doesn't have moisture-wicking gear, and there's no support van trailing behind him with snacks. He is out there completely exposed to the elements.
Completely exposed. And there is a specific story from his first long walk that I think captures what he was actually dealing with. He is out there on the road. He is completely exhausted. He is deeply hungry. And his feet are covered in raw blisters.
Just agony.
Every step. And up ahead, he comes across a halfway temple along the road.
A place to rest.
Yes. He goes inside. And the conditions inside are peaceful. The food is warm. The people there see how battered he is, and they start encouraging him to just stay.
Which is the most natural human response. Anyone would say yes to that.
And he is standing there, deeply tempted to just stop. But then he remembers his teacher's strict words about not avoiding adversity.
So what does he do?
He turns around, walks out the door, and leaves immediately.
Huh.
And from that day forward, he refused to ever enter a temple on pilgrimage again.
Wow. It's almost like a form of psychological exposure therapy. Instead of retreating from the pain, he's leaning directly into it to prove to his brain that the alarm bell doesn't control his actions.
That is exactly what he was doing. And you see that even more clearly when it came to food.
How so?
Well, consider what happened when he had to walk through hostile villages. Sometimes he could find absolutely no food, and he would go days without a proper meal while burning thousands of calories walking.
Just the sheer biology of that is terrifying. I get irritated if my lunch is an hour late. I can't imagine the physical panic of your body essentially eating itself for energy while you are still forcing it to march.
He actually noted that he was sometimes close to tears from the sheer, raw physical pain of hunger.
I bet.
The natural biological reaction when you are starving is to sit down and conserve energy. But instead of stopping, when the hunger was at its absolute worst, he forced himself to walk even faster.
Walking faster when you are starving, that makes absolutely no logical sense. It's completely counterintuitive.
It is, unless you understand the mechanism of what he was training. He was deliberately using the physical pain and the hunger as a direct tool for endurance.
So he is literally reprogramming his nervous system.
Yes. And that reprogramming was tested to its absolute limit when he made the decision to cross the Himalayas under extreme conditions.
The environment there is just unforgiving. Freezing temperatures, treacherous paths, incredibly thin air.
It's brutal. He was completely sleep-deprived and physically exhausted to the point where his system was breaking down. And as he was walking through the snow mountains, he actually began experiencing strange, dreamlike hallucinations.
See, if I start hallucinating on a freezing mountain by myself, panic sets in immediately. That is a sign of systemic failure. How did he not just lose his mind out there?
Because of right mindfulness. When the hallucinations started, he didn't panic, but he also didn't engage with them. He relied purely on mindfulness to act as a wedge between his perception and his reaction.
That is an unbelievable level of mental control. But it raises a really big question for me. Why push yourself to the point of hallucinating in the freezing cold? Why was he going to India in the first place?
That is the essential question. By this point in his life, he had studied very widely. He had spent time at various Chinese Buddhist academies and learned from respected masters all across China.
So he had access to the best education available in his own country.
He did. But despite all that rigorous study and searching in China, he still felt he had not yet found the Buddha's original and authentic teaching.
Like something fundamental was missing.
Exactly. He wanted the absolute source. And he believed he had to physically go to India to find it.
So he survives the Himalayas, he actually makes it to India, and does he find what he's looking for?
He does. In the snow mountains of India, he finally encountered his true teacher, Master Gusu.
And what happens in that encounter?
It is from Master Gusu that he finally receives the authentic Satipatthana.
What is that exactly?
Briefly, Satipatthana is the Buddha's foundational teaching on mindfulness.
Okay, and I imagine after walking thousands of miles and nearly starving to death to find this, he doesn't just get a quick summary and head home.
No. He stayed with his teacher for 3 full months and received the teaching in a full and complete way.
You can almost feel the physical and emotional shift in his story right at this point. That relentless driving forward motion, the walking across deserts and freezing mountain passes, it finally comes to a resting point. He has what he needs.
He does. So he quietly returns to China. And specifically, he heads to Zhongnan Mountain.
And Zhongnan Mountain, just for context, is a mountain region in China associated with hermits and spiritual cultivation, right?
Exactly. It's the transition from that long, grueling outward search into a state of profound inward stillness. He finally enters the remote mountain seclusion that his teacher originally challenged him with.
And how did he actually live up there? Because going from constant walking to total isolation is a massive shock to the system.
In the deep wilderness, the nights were completely dark and filled with the cries of wild animals. For most of us, if you are alone in the wilderness and wild animals start howling around you, the immediate reaction is terror.
Oh, absolutely. I would be terrified. You're alone. You have no protection.
But for him, those sounds brought a profound stillness. He actually noted that the sounds of the animals brought out a deep sense of compassion in him. At dusk, he would sit and watched them moving through the mountains in total peace.
It's like all those classical texts he memorized as a child, the ideas about natural simplicity. They weren't abstract philosophy anymore. It was just the concrete reality of his daily life.
Exactly. And he had this incredibly beautiful way of describing that state of non-attachment. He said that living there was like being a bird in the sky.
What do you mean?
The bird isn't attached to the tree it rests on for the night. And it isn't attached to the spring where it stops to drink water. It just uses what it needs, appreciates it, and flies on.
Complete freedom from clinging to things.
Complete freedom. He said that if death came for him while he was out there in the wilderness, he would simply leave alone. He wouldn't trouble anyone.
When you step back and look at the whole picture, it is just staggering. We started with an 11-year-old boy reading a biography, and we followed him through decades of extreme physical adversity. And where it leads is to this awakened ascetic, sitting entirely alone in the mountains, perfectly at peace with solitude, and perfectly at peace with the reality of his own death.
It really forces you to look at the mechanics of your own life differently.
It does. Which leaves you listening with a thought to really sit with today. We spend so much of our daily lives furiously building security. We accumulate comforts and we surround ourselves with constant noise, often just to distract ourselves from the reality of our own minds.
Yeah.
If all of that were suddenly stripped away today, the screens, the schedules, the safety nets, and you were left entirely alone in the wild, what would you actually hear in your own mind? And maybe the harder question, are you brave enough to sit with that silence?
It's a heavy thought and a necessary one. But as absolute as that peace on the mountain sounds, his story does not end in that isolation.
No, it doesn't.
Because after spending years finding this clarity in total seclusion, something eventually compelled Master Dianwu to come back down the mountain, right back into the noise of the human world. And what drove him to do that is exactly what we will uncover next time on Awakened Daily Life.